Mary, how does it the fault? We believe that all men are created equal.
To the magnificent mosaic that is America.
From radio beacon to radio beacon.
I have a dream today.
Change has come to America.
Believe it.
Knock, knock. Who's there?
It's a figment of your imagination.
Randi Rhodes Show.
Turn up your mind.
Maria Butina previously said in court this morning that her mind is clear, and in just the past few moments, Maria Butina has said that she knowingly engaged in a conspiracy against the United States. This is all transpiring in court in a lead-up to when she will formally plead guilty. The prosecutors really unveiling a lot in court in just the past few minutes. They said, Kate, 1 hour into this hearing, it was one word that Maria Butina said. She just said it to the judge: guilty. Maria Butina has pleaded guilty to conspiracy against the United States, acting as an illegal foreign agent of Russia. This is all unfolded amid tremendous detail from prosecutors. Prosecutors talking about the fact that Maria Butina started this conspiracy in March 2015. She actually drafted a policy proposal. She called it Description of the Diplomacy Project. And in that proposal, she outlined her plan to act as an official conduit between Russia and the United States, particularly Republican officials or Republican-leaning groups like the National Rifle Association. Prosecutors detailed how she actually received $125,000 from that former Russian bank official Alexander Torshin to attend the National Rifle Association conference. They also went into great detail about how Butina wanted to make these connections with Republican officials, influential political leaders. So all of this, Kate, being laid out in court, but the most important thing happening just moments ago, Maria Butina pleading guilty to conspiracy against the United States. And Kate, she could face up to 5 years in prison. That will be determined at a later sentencing. She's going to be in jail until that sentencing. And then after she serves her prison time, whatever it may be, she likely will be deported back to Russia.
Oh boy, oh boy. And we have another thread. None of this is normal, okay? Could I just tell you that? None of it is normal. All right, so here is the statement of offense. This is what Maria Butina pled guilty to today. And I told you she's more important than you think. So is Papadopoulos. I mean, there are some, players in this soap opera of, it should be called Defrauding the United States, because there was a whole conspiracy to do that. Many players, as you know, each one had their wheelhouse in which they were operating. Bannon and Breitbart, and there was a whole media thing, the PSYOPs part of it, right. And then you had the money part, NRA, Butina, Torshin. There's soon going to be a Saudi part. A Saudi part is going to freak you out. That's going to have Jared in it. That's going to have Junior in it. That's going to have Ivanka in it. That's going to have, a lot of people in it, the Saudi part. And Eric Prince and George Nader and Michael Flynn, the Saudi part. I don't know if you're ready for that part, but like I said, there's multiple groups of people doing multiple things in order to defraud the United States. And in order to do that, that's a violation of law. They had to break other laws. One of the laws that appears to have been broken here is, again, the Foreign Agent Registration Act. She never told anybody in the United States, let alone the State Department, when she was applying for a student visa to go to Howard's alma mater, American University over there in Washington, at Ward Circle. I used to live right there. She didn't tell anybody what she was doing here. And this plan and this plot had begun long ago. See, she got here in 2015. But Alexander Torshin, who paid the bills for her, who helped her get here, who put her in touch with, this Paul Erickson dude, who, by the way, Paul Erickson has gotten a target letter from Robert Mueller. A target letter means an indictment is coming. And he helped this woman defraud the United States. He introduced her to everybody. He gave her background information on every politician, how important they were, how to get to them, what their interests were. I mean, it was like they had dossiers on every Republican politician. Now, why is Butina so important to me? Because what's important to me is this GOP that has made so many freaking excuses for all the crap that this president had done. All of it. I mean, they just keep defending. And everybody was, is sitting here going, why are they defending? Why are they defending? Because they're complicit. They're implicated. They were present. They know who this woman is. They traveled to Russia at the behest of Maria Butina's stupid gun rights group, which had 2 people in it. They knew what they were doing. This is just the most obvious place to connect the dots between the GOP, their complicity, money, trips they got to. Yeah, it's just so sad.
In this particular case, there's individuals, not the president, who have been accused of crimes, who have pled guilty to crimes, and this is part of their sentencing process. There's no reason to not stand by anybody in this moment. There are pleadings, there are cases, there are evidence. We're going to wait for all of it to be out there, and I would caution everyone to wait for all of it to be out there until you make judgment. Your judgment may not change.
There are thousands and thousands of rules. It's incredibly complicated, campaign finance. We have to decide whether or not really criminal penalties are the way we should approach criminal finance.
Is this something bigger? Is this a campaign finance violation, which would obviously, I don't think, be anywhere near impeachable?
It's just like a lot of other things that we've done in Washington. We've over-criminalized campaign finance.
Does it bother you, these crimes that he allegedly was involved in, the president? That doesn't bother you?
No, because I don't think he was involved in crimes. But even then, you can make anything a crime under the current laws.
The question is then whether or not this so-called hush money is a crime.
We have to get all the facts, and I'm going to wait.
I think until there's more evidence produced, charges filed, those sorts of things, I think we just need to keep our powder dry.
I can't imagine basing any kind of prosecution on the word of Mr. Cohen.
I don't think anyone would consider that to be a campaign contribution. To me, if you have a wife, you have a family, you want to protect your reputation, it would be common, unfortunately, to have to pay somebody off. It's a form of blackmail. And again, this has been done in the past. To look upon that as an illegal campaign contribution, to me, is stretching the law so far.
If Schiff is taking this beyond to go forward and say there's a impeachable offense because of a campaign finance problem, there's a lot of members in Congress who would have to leave for that same place.
Okay, so there you have the GOP in complete and utter denial. They're not in denial. They know. They're just protecting their own complicity, okay? Everybody wonders, why are they doing this? Why are they? Because they were complicit, and here's the link, okay? Here is the statement of offense that Maria Butina pled guilty to today. And this is just a smidge. Okay, this is a smidge which is stipulated at the beginning of this agreement. It says, pursuant to the federal rules of criminal procedure, the United States and defendant Maria Butina. I'm guessing it's Butina because, my last name is Butin. And it's Russian. And Putin, Butin, Butina, those are common names. But I like Butina. Just has a little ring to it. So, okay, Butina stipulate and agree that the following facts are true and accurate. These facts do not constitute all the facts known to the parties concerning the charged offense and covered conduct. This is just an example, and this is what they say. The statement is being submitted by the parties just to demonstrate that sufficient facts exist to establish that the defendant committed the offense to which she's pleading guilty. So they're just giving you a little tiny bit, a little tiny taste, just so that the court knows that there are sufficient facts that she conspired against the United States at the behest of a foreign adversary. Statement of facts. The government's evidence includes, but is not limited to, the following. Maria Butina is a citizen of the Russian Federation. U.S. person 1, that's Paul Erickson. Paul Erickson has gotten a target letter. Paul Erickson is about to be indicted. All right? So we'll just put his name in there. Butina and Paul Erickson agreed and conspired with a Russian official, that's Alexander Torshin, and at least one other person. for Butina to act in the United States under the direction of Alexander Torshin without prior notification to the Attorney General. Russian official Torshin has served as the deputy governor of the Russian Central Bank since at least 2015. Well, coincidentally, that is the year that they brought her here. He previously served as the first deputy chairman of the Federation Council of the Russian Federation. It's like a Senate Majority Leader is what that is. Butina knows Alexander Torshin. With Paul Ericsson's assistance and subject to Torshin's direction, Butina sought to establish unofficial lines of communications with Americans having power and influence over U.S. politics. Butina sought to use those unofficial lines of communication for the benefit of Russia, acting through Alexander Torshin. In furtherance of the conspiracy, Butina drafted a proposal in March of 2015, which is when she got here, titled Description of the Diplomacy Project. In it, Butina downplayed the possibility of influencing U.S. foreign policy towards Russia through official channels. She criticized government unwillingness to compromise with Russia. As an alternative, Butina suggested that Russia could use unofficial back channels of communication to the same end. Butina then cast herself as a possible unofficial transmitter of communications between Russia and the United States. Further, Butina opined the circumstances were favorable for building relations with a certain U.S. political party, hereinafter political party number one. The pressure of a name. Who could that be? Oh, God. Butina predicted that the candidate nominated by the GOP would likely win the upcoming U.S. presidential election. Pointing to her recent travel to the United States, her experience, and her attendance at conferences organized by a gun rights group, the NRA, which Butina posited had influence over the GOP. Read, every Republican congressman gets big buku bucks from the NRA. A wholly owned subsidiary of the NRA would be the GOP. And she concludes this just as soon as she gets here. Why? Because previously they had gone to see her in Russia. I'll tell you how that happened. But anyway, Butina stated she had laid the groundwork for a back channel of communication with the next U.S. administration. For example, Butina listed actions she had already taken, including being introduced to the leaders of the GOP as an unofficial representative of Alexander Torshin's. She also identified in her proposal a series of upcoming conferences associated with the GOP that she could use to further her goal. That would be the National Prayer Breakfast. The Description of Diplomacy Project was written by Butina with Paul Ericsson's assistance. Paul Ericsson assisted with the proposal by providing Butina with information about prominent U.S. political figures and a forecast of the upcoming presidential election. Paul Ericsson also assisted by providing information about Vladimir Posner, a Russian media commentator who, as described in Maria Butina's proposal, had served as the unofficial transmitter of the policies of Gorbachev and Boris Yeltsin in the United States. Butina sent a Google-translated version of the proposal to Paul Ericsson once it was drafted, and asked for Paul Ericsson's advice on it, which he agreed to provide. Butina then sent the proposal to Alexander Torshin and others. As part of the proposal, she requested $125,000 from a Russian billionaire to attend the conferences identified in the proposal and separate meetings with interested parties, including other Russian businessmen or persons at the Russian Ministry of Foreign Affairs, to help determine where the focus of Russian interests lie in cooperating with the United States. Butina informed Paul Ericsson that she was meeting with Alexander Torshin and others about her proposal. Alexandra Torshin informed Butina that her proposal would be supported. Without prior notification to the Attorney General, Butina then took steps to achieve the object of her agreement with Paul Erickson. For example, in April of 2015, Butina traveled to the United States to attend an NRA organization event. There, Butina highlighted her experience as a gun rights advocate in Russia to gain the attention of the NRA and its members. She was introduced to influential members of the GOP, one of whom announced his campaign to run for the presidency of the United States shortly thereafter. Well, now, I checked. That was the NRA meeting in Nashville in 2015. And I mean, everyone was there, okay? Everyone. Cruz was there. Rubio was there. The only one that got snubbed was Rand Paul. But all of the, what's his name? Sarah Huckabee Sanders' daddy was there. Mike Huckabee. You name it. It was every GOP candidate that was on that stage was at that NRA convention. Every single one of them. She also invited powerful members of the NRA to Moscow to advance her agenda. And before they arrived, Paul Erickson provided Butina with background information on the invitees, including his assessment of their degree of political influence in the United States. The members came to Moscow in December of 2015. The NRA members met with high-level Russian government officials as arranged by Alexander Torshin. Prior to the visit, Butina stressed the importance of a political program as part of the trip and asked Torshin to set up meetings with high-level Russian politicians. After their visit, Butina sent Torshin a message in Russian referring to the members of the NRA, saying we should let them express their gratitude.
All things Randi at RandiRhodes.com.
Go for launch.
Speaking truth to power, the Randi Rhodes Show.
Malcolm, what do you make of Maria Butina? If 2015, if somebody had seen that video, they would have just thought it's some young Russian reporter, some journalist of some sort, asking this candidate a question. Turns out that she was working hard to infiltrate American organizations.
Yeah, well, when she asked that question, there were a lot of, eyes raised when you started to scrub her background and figure out where she came from. The organization that she was working for, Right to Bear Arms, was a Russian organization, supposedly a small equivalent with 2 people staffing it. That was the equivalent of the NRA. There is no right to bear arms in Russia.
Right.
You are not allowed to have any of the weapons that you can have in the United States. You can have a shotgun and a deer rifle, and they are strictly regulated. So when you go backwards and see them creating these networks of social and personal relationships, all you can come up with is that it's got to be an intelligence operation. I wasn't sure whether Butina, and I wrote about her extensively in one of my books, whether she was actually a clandestine service officer with the Russian SVR, which is the agency that's under the FSB, or whether she was an intelligence subcontractor sent out to co-opt all of these middle-aged men with a woman with a gun, which is very seductive here in the United States. Right now, her being held by the FBI indicates she is likely a Russian spy.
She is. There's no question, and it's being downplayed. It's just not really front and center, and the Saudi ties aren't front and center either, but that's the next phase. All right, so let me finish. This is just, like I said, this is an example of one of the things, or a couple of the things that she did, just so that the court knows that she's pled guilty to an actual crime of defrauding the United States and FARA violations and things like that she never registered as a foreign agent. But there's much, much more that she is accused of that is not in this document. But this document says after she sent Torshin a message in Russian referring to the members of the NRA, she wrote a note to him saying, "We should let them express their gratitude now. We will put pressure on them quietly later." Meaning, pay them now, we'll blackmail them later. They will be quiet. We got them. We got them. When they came to Russia, we got them. I mean, I don't know if they were recorded in their hotel rooms. I don't know if they were seen doing things. But that she brought all of these politicos, all of these senators, all of these, NRA, high-ranking politicians to Russia. And she knows that they now have compromat, which is, the Russian word for compromising information, on them. And she wrote it twice. She said, we should let them express their gratitude now. We will put pressure on them quietly later. Allow them to express their gratitude now and then quietly press them. Now, she wasn't pressing them to bring the right to bear arms to Russia, was she? No. What is she pressing them for? She's blackmailing them. She's what they call a honeypot. She got them to Russia. She got them there so that they could be recorded, so that they could be photographed, so that they could drink their whiskey or whatever and be shown a great time. And then they would be able to blackmail our senators. And, at this particular NRA event, it was everybody. I mean, everybody that was on the stage, that with all the 17 people that ran for president, under the GOP banner, they were all there. All of them. All right, it goes on and it says, Butina also assisted a wealthy and well-connected U.S. person in hosting multiple large friendship dinners where other wealthy and influential Americans discussed U.S.-Russian relations. Butina used these friendship dinners to cultivate the individuals she believed would have the ear of the next U.S. presidential administration. At these dinners, Butina was able to meet individuals with political capital, learn their thoughts, their inclinations towards Russia, gauge their responses to her, and adjust her pitch accordingly. In March 2016, before the first of these dinners, Butina told Alexander Torshin about potential American attendees to one of the dinners based on information she got from Paul Erickson. Following that message, she emailed the wealthy, connected U.S. person, copying Paul Erickson to say, Torshin is very impressed by you and expresses his great appreciation for what you are doing to restore the relations between the two countries. He also wants to let you know Russians will support the efforts from our side. Okay, that's George Neal. That is, he's a Rockefeller Republican heir. Okay, that's who he is. He's an heir to the Rockefeller fortune. In June of 2016, Butina received an F-1 student visa to enter the United States. In connection with her application, Butina did not disclose that she would be acting as an agent of a foreign government or otherwise would be working to establish channels of communication between Russia and American government officials. Also, in furtherance of the conspiracy, Butina helped Alexander Torshin organize a Russian delegation to the 2017 National Prayer Breakfast in Washington, D.C. Torshin directed Butina to include certain people within the delegation, and Butina complied with his instructions. Butina then emailed the list of the delegation invitees to Paul Erickson. Butina explained that the people on the list had been, quote, handpicked by Alexander Torshin and me, and that they were, quote, coming to establish a back channel of communication, end quote. Later, Paul Erickson emailed another person copying Butina to say, quote, reaction to the delegation's presence in America will be relayed directly, in all caps, to the Russian president and foreign minister. That's Vladimir Putin. Throughout the conspiracy, Butina wrote notes to Alexander Torshin about her efforts and her assessment of the political landscape in the United States in advance of the 2016 election. Butina wrote some of these notes in response to specific requests from Alexander Torshin. Others she wrote on her own. Butina also sought Torshin's advice on whether to take meetings with certain people. She asked him for direction on whether the Russian government was ready to meet with some of those people, and he asked her what she planned to do with her contacts, lest she and Torsion be forgotten after the election. See, after the election, they're like, don't forget, what are you going to do with your contacts to remind them that we're going to press them now? What are you going to do with your contacts to remind them that you let them express their gratitude then, but now you're going to start to press them? Butina was aware that Torsion sometimes acted in consultation with the MFA, the Foreign Affairs place, in addition to his superiors at the Russian Central Bank. For example, in May of 2016, Torsion tasked Butina with writing him a note to explain why he should be permitted to travel to the United States to attend the NRA meeting. She did as he directed, encouraging his attendance, partly because of the opportunity to meet political candidates. Butina knew that Alexander Torsion would share this note with his superiors at the Russian Central Bank and to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs to support the request that Torsion be sent to the NRA meeting. In November, okay, this is election time, in November of 2016, in response to a note from Butina about how to create a dialogue with the then president-elect's advisors, Donald Trump, Torsion told her that he did not believe that the Ministry of Foreign Affairs would go for it. Butina failed to notify the U.S. Attorney General that she would be acting in the United States as an agent of a foreign government official as required by 18 U.S.C. 951. At no time relevant to this proffer was Butina a duly accredited diplomatic or consular officer or an officially or publicly acknowledged or sponsored individual or representative of the Russian Federation or an officially and publicly acknowledged and sponsored staff member, employee, or representative thereof. Finally, if this case had proceeded to trial, the government would show that Butina took one or more actions in furtherance of the conspiracy from within the District of Columbia. Now, you know what's interesting? This is not Bob Mueller. This is the District of Columbia. This is the D.C. Attorney's Office. And these are Trump appointees, okay? These are not, political people. Well, I shouldn't say they're not political people. These are not Democrats. These are not, you can say that Robert Mueller, who is an avowed Republican, is, an angry Democrat. All you want doesn't make it true. But this has nothing to do with Mueller's investigation. This is a separate investigation into a Russian spy who came here to cultivate any potential presidential candidate. And then, during 2015-16, it became very obvious that it was going to be Donald Trump. And she was, she was down with it. Now, the reason why I love this story, the reason why the reason why I really, really love this story is because this is the Achilles heel of the NRA. This is the way that the NRA goes down. This is the way the NRA gets destroyed. Yes, the president was cultivated by numerous Russian operatives. She was tasked with blackmailing the people who would serve in Congress once Trump was elected. And apparently, by all that, he didn't do anything wrong kind of talk that we just played from the GOP across the House, across the Senate, it freaking worked because they won't say anything negative about all of the crimes that Trump is obviously being investigated for having committed. Some of them proven already, okay? Now, this is how the NRA will fall apart. Okay, because you go back in time and you read some other articles and you remember when you start reading the older pieces and even the newer pieces, you start to read that the two Russian operatives who had ties to the National Rifle Association, who were cultivating not just the Trump presidential campaign. See, now we know they were cultivating members of Congress to cover for whatever Trump was going to do with sanctions, whatever Trump's going to do if, Russia is going to invade Ukraine, and they're going to do it like any day now. Any day now. And everybody knows it who pays attention to world military movements. I mean, he's got ground forces on the border right now with Ukraine. He's moving ships. Okay, what did we send? We sent one naval vessel. He took 23 sailors. He still has those guys. No one talks about it. Doesn't even make the news, okay? He's about ready to invade Ukraine, and he's going to be able to do it with impunity because you got a Congress that won't do jack crap, and you got a president who's owned, totally compromised. Now, the NRA has only said that it received $2,500 from Russian sources. They said it was one single contribution of less than $1,000 from one of the operatives, and that would be Alexander Torshin. That's all the NRA has ever said. They got $1,000 from Alexander Torshin, which they're entitled to get as long as they don't mix it with their political money. Yeah, but that's not exactly what they're finding now. Now what they're finding is that the Senate Intel Committee, the House Intel Committee, which is soon to be headed up by Adam Schiff, do not believe that. Because Alexander Torshin was treated to fundraisers that cost like, $10,000 just to walk in the door. And he was part of, quote, the Golden Ring of Freedom, which is $1 million or more. Those are donors who give $1 million or more. And there are photographs of Alexander Torshin wearing the custom gold jacket that the Gold Ring of Freedom members get to wear, and ringing the Liberty Bell, which also the Golden Ring of Freedom gets to ring. And they show Torshin, at numerous fundraisers, starting back in Houston, starting back in 2011. In Houston, Texas. In May of 2013, he's invited to every. Now, if you know anything about fundraising events, I can give you firsthand experience about fundraising events. Let's say I'll give you an easy one. Let's say Al Gore is going to give a talk in a donor's living room. Okay, so that donor is going to host a fundraiser in their living room, and so they'll send out invitations to people who they think might be able to pay to attend something like that. So if you want to go and sit down and have dinner with Al Gore at this person's house, which is very intimate, they might say it's $50,000 for you and a guest. Now, if it's at a conference, they might say you could get to sit at a table far away from Al Gore for $5,000. But if you want a meet and greet with Al Gore, you have to give $7,500. And if you want a private conversation with Al Gore, then it's $10,000 per person. Like that. That's how it works, right? And the same thing with the NRA, right? You get invited to a fundraiser, you have to give money. And Torshin posts photos all over. I mean, just Google it, NRA Alexander Torshin, because now you know who he is, right? There are photos online all over the place. In hotel suites, at a fundraising event, at a fundraising dinner, at a fundraising auction, at a ceremony for the Golden Ring of Freedom, ringing the Liberty Bell, wearing a custom gold jacket. And back then, Torshin was able to co-opt the NRA. Around 2013, he talked the then president, board member of the NRA, David Keene, into traveling to Moscow to talk to, guess who? Maria Butina's stupid two-person organization, Russia's gun rights, or whatever the stupid thing, Russia's right to bear arms. That's two people, okay? It's not a real thing. You can't, there's no right to bear arms in Russia. And they all started traveling to Russia. You've got the president of the NRA at the time, James Porter, the NRA operations director, Kyle Weaver, Wayne LaPierre, who was the executive vice president at the time. And they're going there and they're doing grassroots fundraising in Russia.
Speak Speak to Randi. Call 561-270-3844.
561-270-3844. All right, let's go back in time a little bit and explore what Alexandra Torshin was doing with the NRA as far back as 2011. Okay, so I told you could Google Maria Butina and Wayne LaPierre. You could Google Alexandra Torshin, NRA. You'll find a million pictures of him being included in these $1 million or more fundraising, fundraisers, but also in the circle of people who have given $1 million or more to the NRA. All right? Just so you know. Among other NRA leaders, Torshin is pictured in Houston with then outgoing president and current board member David Keene, who traveled to Moscow later that fall and again in 2015 to attend events hosted by Maria Butina and her gun rights group, the Right to Bear Arms. Also appearing with Alexandra Torshin in the Houston photos are incoming president James Porter and then NRA Director Kyle Weaver, who worked under NRA Executive Vice President Wayne LaPierre, including overseeing grassroots fundraising. Torshin also hobnobbed with top Ring of Freedom $1 million or more donor Joe Gregory and former Republican House Majority Leader Tom DeLay. Now, you remember why Tom DeLay is, Hot Tub Tom? Do you remember? He's not in Congress anymore because he got caught in the Jack Abramoff lobbying scandal, okay? And so he was run out on a rail because he's dirty, right? Okay. In one photo, Torshin poses with Keene and Weaver in a hotel suite. Torshin is wearing an NRA conference ID badge, an official 2013 NRA conference pin on his lapel, just below his Russian flag pin. Don't you ever, you GOP, you maggots, you Cult 45 members, you Trump pansies, don't you ever come and tell me about a flag with regard to, Central Americans. Oh, they're carrying the wrong flag. This guy's got a Russian flag and an NRA pin, and he's with the $1 million or more donors and cultivating members of the House and the Senate as far back as 2011. Guys so dirty, they're not even there anymore. And guys so dirty, and they are there, which is the important part. Okay, so Keene first became friendly with Torshin in 2011 and the NRA conference in Pittsburgh, and he hosted Torshin at the subsequent 2012 conference in St. Louis, where Torshin said in a tweet that he and two unidentified companions were treated by the NRA as guests of the highest level. When Keene traveled to Moscow in the fall of 2013, he spoke enthusiastically at Maria Butina's gathering. He said, working together with the Right to Bear Arms was an honor, and that he had hosted Torshin over the past 3 years at the NRA. Among the high-profile speakers at the NRA 2013 conference in Houston was our current national security advisor. Our previous national security advisor was so compromised by the Russians that Sally Yates had to run to the White House 26 days into the Trump presidency to tell him, you got to get rid of this guy. This guy's compromised. The Russians have everything on him. Everything. I mean, you can't have a national security advisor that could be blackmailed by Russia. And Russia knows he's lying, and he is lying. And he, he's trying to build some sort of a nuclear reactor in the Middle East with, Russia building it. And so he's been replaced, Michael Flynn, who will be sentenced on Monday. Jesus. By this guy. This guy. Here is a tape of our current national security advisor, John Bolton, addressing Maria Butina's group.
Thank you for this opportunity to address the Russian people on the 20th anniversary of the adoption of the Russian Constitution. This document signaled a new era of freedom for the Russian people and created a new force for democracy in the world.
Oh my God.
While more time has passed since the United States created our own constitutional freedoms, we never forget the joyful optimism that marked the beginning of our democratic history. We wish our Russian friends that same hope and pray for you the strength to preserve these first precious freedoms. Today, you're engaged in a historic debate about the possible expansion of your freedoms. Should the Russian people have the right to bear arms? I can share with you a word about what this particular freedom has meant to Americans and offer you encouragement as you consider embracing that freedom, which so many nations and cultures have found to be the essential defense for all other freedoms.
Okay, so that's 6 years ago, and guess what? Putin has never given the Russian people the right to bear arms. I never will, because this is a phony group that was set up to infiltrate the NRA, because the NRA is the owners of the GOP, which Butina was sent here to cultivate, co-opt, and get dirt on for the purpose of pressing them later. By the way, Mr. Bolton's security clearance is on the list of issues at the House Oversight Committee. The House Oversight Committee, once it becomes, the chairman becomes a Democrat next year, they are going to investigate how John Bolton got his security clearance and whether or not it should be revoked, because they want to know whether or not John Bolton disclosed his involvement, let's say, with Maria Butina and any related contacts that he might have had with Russians who sought to defraud the United States, right? Now, it is legal for foreign citizens to donate to causes, but federal law does not allow them to contribute any money to U.S. political campaigns. And that includes a ban on donations to PACs, political action committees. Now, McClatchy, who is part of the consortium of the Panama Papers, when I tell you McClatchy is a great news organization, I'm not kidding you. These are like some of the finest, hardest working reporters that get very little attention. And it's sad because they do really grueling work, going through ledgers and papers and money trails and all that, right? So McClatchy in January issued a report. And in their report, they said that the FBI was investigating whether or not Russian money was illegally flowing through the NRA into the Trump campaign. Because the NRA gave Donald Trump the largest amount that the NRA has ever given to anybody, a whopping $30 million. You know, and prior to that, I think in 2012, when Obama was running for re-election, the NRA spent $15 million. So this is double. Yeah. Now, according to the publications that the NRA puts out, they had a fundraiser. That one that I was telling you about that Torsion was at in Houston. They had a fundraiser that night. And they put out a press release about that night. And they said that they had raised a whopping $1.7 million during that one fundraiser in Houston, including a record individual who, at the auction that they held for fundraising purposes, that Alexander Torsion was attending, they said that they got one individual who donated a record $500,000 at that banquet and auction. Torsion was presented at that particular banquet / auction with the gift of a rifle. This is according to Rolling Stone magazine. And the Maria Butina, the Russian operative, also tweeted from Houston that when he stood up Torsion. The NRA greeted him with thunderous applause. And that's because they only applaud big money. Big money, everybody. It's like a, a game show. Big money, big money. Come on, big money, big money. And so we're now going to have a complete, not just a glimpse, which is what we get now, but a complete accounting of the NRA's activities regarding Maria Butina, regarding Donald Trump, Ted Cruz, Marco Rubio, Mike Huckabee, everybody but Rand Paul, who was snubbed, and Alexander Torshin and Maria Butina. And of course, Alexander Torshin, he's a banker. He's a banker. He's the money guy. He's the guy that puts the money wherever it needs to go. So for me, this is a twofer. This is just a twofer. It's information that shows you how the Russians got money to Donald Trump and tried to elude detection. It tells you the story of Maria Butina and how she really is a spy, and she has been for a really long time, and how she lured our politicians, the GOP type, over to Russia, let them throw down, let them party, got their compromise, said let them express their gratitude for the great time they had. We'll press them quietly later, which is why they are all denying Russian interference in our election. They were part of it. They were the recipients of it. They're complicit in it. And I got to tell you, we only have like 2 campaign finance laws. One is can't take foreign money, and the other is political action committees can't coordinate with presidential campaigns. Those are like the only 2 campaign finance laws we have. And Trump managed to violate both of them. We only have the 2.
We've been focusing, rightfully so, on Russia, on the payments to these women. Let me say this unequivocally. As a guy who spent most of his career in business in New York, in the advertising business, and the real estate business, the fashion business, it's a small world. Donald Trump, in the industry of real estate developers, which is kind of a bit of a slimy business to begin with, was known as the bottom of the bottom of the bottom of the food chain. I have heard story after story. This is a criminal guy. You have to do a dotted line to Letitia Jones, the Attorney General of New York, who came out today and said, oh, we're just starting with his foundation. We're starting with the organization. Russia and those Stormy Daniels are the least of his problems. To your point, what is going to put him in jail eventually, what is going to destroy everything he's ever built and his children, is a 30-year dishonest criminal enterprise. That is what is, one thing will take him out of the presidency. The other thing will ruin him forever. And on top of that, the political incentive for every U.S. attorney in New York or in Virginia to do it is, this guy showed up and tried to undo what 250 years of people have been dying for in this country, who we are, what we stand for. So there is a moral imperative.
The rule of law.
The rule, what we are about, what our grandfathers died for, democracy. He single-handedly is the first guy in our lifetime that tried to undo that. And he is going to pay for that the rest of his life as they pick apart his criminal enterprise. This is the very, very beginning of the story.
Believe me. Seriously, dude. This man is so completely disloyal to everybody, including his country. And that's the problem. That's what is pissing off everybody. That is what's getting underneath everybody's skin. The more you peel this onion, the more criminality you see, the more shady characters that, plead guilty, and the more we get these sentencing documents and plea agreements and statements of offense, the more that we hear and the more that we understand and the more that we know, the more offensive it becomes to everybody, especially people who really, truly, truly appreciate being American, who care about the rule of law, because that's what an American is. An American is somebody who isn't ruled by men. We're ruled by a rule of law. We're ruled by a certain set of statutes, a certain set of standards. This is why libertarians piss me off. This is why Rand Paul pisses me off. When you hear Rand Paul say things like there shouldn't be any campaign finance laws, it's because Rand Paul believes all laws should be struck from the books. Everybody should just be able to do whatever they want, including purchase members of the Senate, including purchase members of the House, including purchasing presidencies and presidents, including purchasing legislation that favors them, including getting in front of people who write the tax laws so that those of us who don't do as well as the billionaires are footing the entire bill for the socialist military, right? The military protects everybody regardless of ability to pay. That's in theory, but in practice, not really so much. The taxpayers are the people that foot the bill for the police, for the military, for transportation, for roads, tunnels, bridges, and everything that makes us a civilized country. Taxes are the price of civilization. And yet, you've got all these people sitting on high who manage to avoid paying their taxes, offshore their obligations, invert it, the carried interest bull. You know what that is, the carried interest thing? It says, well, I won't pay it this year. I'll carry it forward to next year. Maybe I'll pay it next year. And then when things become due, they write into the code another way to avoid paying this year. I'll pay next year. And of course, they never, ever pay. They never, ever pay. And we end up footing the entire bill. Now, in the blue states, we're taxed higher because our property is worth more. And we then support the red states who keep voting for this. And that's why the blue states are so peeved at all of this. People who live in an urban environment, people who read newspapers, people who are in a society where there's lots of diversity and where there's lots of opinions and where there's lots of, hustle and bustle and there's, everybody's a hamster in the wheel, but, we all are interacting with each other and we all depend on each other to be honest and forthright in their taxes, honest and forthright in our dealings. We don't jaywalk. We don't crash our cars into the sidewalk. We don't do those things. We understand that it's illegal to purchase a person. And therefore, campaign finance laws, just the two that we really have, cannot be violated. Corporations are not people. Corporations are entities in the law only. And the reason to incorporate is because it protects you from certain liabilities. And for that privilege, you are not a person. You are a legal entity created on paper. Corporations don't have mammograms. Corporations don't have colonoscopies. Corporations, if they were selling heroin, my God, their shareholders would run them out on a rail, right? Because selling heroin is illegal. Well, you can't own a person either. That's illegal. And yet they buy people. And you got douchebags out there, one of them's going to be a senator this year, okay, who are telling you corporations are people.
Corporations are people, my friend.
People are people. Thank you. People are people. Corporations are legal entities in paper only, and yet they are allowed to purchase people. They purchase senators. And the NRA is, a PAC. It's a political action committee. And it's literally purchasing every GOP member that wants to run, that has run, that won, that serves, that will serve. And it's got to be destroyed. Today, where was that, Scotty? You were telling me in Indianapolis? Indiana? Yeah. Was it in Indianapolis? Someplace in Indiana. A little kid, a 13-year-old boy, he was going to go shoot up his school. And somebody tipped off the police that he was going to go and he was going to shoot up his school. And it got into a big, shootout between the police and this kid. And the kid ended up killing himself and thereby averting another school shooting catastrophe. The NRA is standing in between us and sensible gun reform. You remember yesterday we had a caller from a guy who remembers me from New York. His name's Mamoon. And Mamoon was like, why don't we and I said to him, Mamoon, listen to me. You got to have a better way into the NRA than just simply shouting at the rain. We can't just yell at them all the time, okay? You got to have a way in to destroy this organization. And this, Maria Butina, Alexander Torshin, NRA violation of campaign. Oh, and I'll tell you another one. Like I said, there's only two campaign finance rules anymore, right? You don't even have to disclose your donors. You know, dark money is funneled through PACs all the time, right? And they don't have to list their donors. You don't even know who's purchasing, you know, this senator or that one. We don't even know who's like buying the house. We have no idea. We do know that the NRA is buying the entire GOP. They're just Big Pharma also owns everybody in Congress. Everybody. But the National Rifle Association goes ahead and it spends $30 million to elect Donald Trump, more than any other conservative group spends to elect Donald Trump. And it turns out, you know, one of the rules about political action committees is, and this is what I'm saying, they're trying to say, oh, campaign finance laws, you know, you could bend it, anything, you know, and if people would go to jail for breaking campaign finance, we'd all go to jail. Well, good. Bye-bye. Bye-bye, dickhead. See you in Attica. But there's really only two. Foreign money is one of them. And the other one is that a political action committee cannot coordinate with the candidates. Okay? They can make their expenditures. They could buy TV commercials. They could do whatever the hell they want with their money. They could, you know, do whatever they want over here, but they can't coordinate their spending with the candidate, which is clearly what the NRA did here. And now we know that that's true. Mother Jones, which is a great magazine, I've been reading it forever. Mother Jones did an article about the money that the NRA spent on television and the money that the Trump campaign spent on television was being bought by the same person. Now, if you're a media buyer, meaning you're buying commercials for your client, and your client is a political organization, you have to put up a firewall between your political organization and any work you might do for a political candidate. You have to sign a document, actually. And, you know, being in radio my whole life, I'm very familiar with compliance rules. There are public integrity files that are kept, okay? Television stations and radio stations have to keep political ads for 5 years. We're like the only entities in the world that have to keep all these logs, okay? And so as a radio person, you have to comply with these inspection filings, public inspection files. TV stations, radio stations, they maintain them so that they can show that political organizations are separate and apart from political action committees or political action groups. Turns out that there's a media buyer named Red Eagle. There's a media buyer named AMAG, and there's another media buyer, and they're all the same company, in fact, the same person. And that same person was placing ads for the NRA and placing ads for the Trump campaign in the same exact cities, in the same exact shows, at the same exact time. Now, you can't have a firewall in your own brain, so that would mean that you're not able to do both. But they were doing it. A guy named John Farrell, he's been named in FCC filings. He was representing the Trump campaign and the NRA during the 2016 presidential election. That's illegal too. So I got, you know, it's like I'm saying, we have so few campaign finance laws, and yet they managed to break the two that we have. And the only reason the Republicans are defending it is because that's been a gravy train for them, number one. And number two, they're compromised. There are 4 people that Mother Jones talked to. A girl named Christy Kovach. She was listed by Red Eagle as the point of contact. And then an identical form that Red Eagle, this is the media buyer, filed for the NRA in Cincinnati, at WCPO in Cincinnati, also lists Christy Kovach. So she's buying ads for the Trump campaign and she's buying ads for the NRA. She's a senior buyer. She's been with the firm for 20 years. She knows these rules. I know these rules. It's your job to know these rules if you are working as a media buyer. And she knows these rules. They all know these rules. Bye-bye, NRA.
Show is live on RandiRhodes.com and the free Progressive Voices app for Android and iOS. Visit the App Store or ProgressiveVoices.com now.
But I'll bring up something else that raises a question of another Trump attorney who might be just wondering tonight, and that is Rudy Giuliani. Because you know who David Pecker called to decontaminate his anthrax-filled building? Rudy Giuliani and a company called Bio1. So when you need toxic waste removed, you call Mr. Giuliani. That's way back, years ago, that relationship existed. And I wonder what Mr. Pecker has to say and knows about Rudy Giuliani.
Ooh, me too, me too. I want to know. I remember that. You remember when the National Enquirer was infected with anthrax? I do. You know why? Because the National Enquirer was right down the street from the radio station I worked at when the anthrax attacks came. And then, you know, they pointed to a dead scientist and they said he did it. Remember that? Yeah, but apparently David Pecker at the National Enquirer called Rudy Giuliani, who, you know, Rudy Giuliani's had so many companies, so many of them, and none of them ever work out, none of them. And, you know, he joined, well, he had Bio1, and they contracted to clean up the AMI building, except that they didn't clean up the AMI building because there was a whole tranche of photographs, and Rudy didn't want to clean up the photograph. I don't know. And so those photographs became a very big point of contention, like who could get the custody of those photographs, all the photographs that the National Enquirer had. And so they fired Rudy Giuliani because Rudy Giuliani said, that he had the photographs. He wasn't going to give them back. And then they said, no, the photographs are contaminated. It's just a weird story. But meanwhile, Rudy Giuliani then went on to have Bracewell Giuliani, a security firm. Then Bracewell took Giuliani's name off the letterhead, right? And so now it's just Bracewell. And then he went to Greenberg Traurig, which is the biggest lobby shop in the history of lobby shops. And I know this because Howard was a managing partner there. They hired Jack Abramoff. They hired Rudy Giuliani. And now Rudy Giuliani has been let go by Greenberg Traurig after his dog and pony show on the TV protecting Donald Trump from Michael Cohen, who said that they paid off. They bought the stories of Karen McDougal at AMI, and they funneled a payment to Stormy Daniels at AMI, and David Pecker is cooperating now. He signed a cooperation agreement, and it turns out that David Pecker has just revealed that the third person in the room in 2015, when Michael Cohen was discussing with David Pecker what to do about all of Trump's mistresses and what to do with all of the photographs of Donald Trump with bare-breasted women, Donald Trump's doorman story that said that Donald Trump had another child with a woman, and that they kept buying these stories from these various women, from the doorman at Trump Tower, and catching these stories and killing them, right? And so now they're having a conversation because Donald Trump is running for president about what to do about all these photographs, what to do about all these stories. And Michael Cohen is in a room with David Pecker. And as you know, in Michael Cohen's indictment, in Michael Cohen's guilty plea, in Michael Cohen's sentencing documents, we have them all now, Michael Cohen says he was in a room with David Pecker and another person. Today we find out from David Pecker that the other person was Donald Trump. And Donald Trump's tweeting. Michael Cohen did this on his own. I was taking advice from a lawyer. Oh, bite me. You weren't. You were in a criminal conspiracy to protect yourself is what you were doing during a campaign. And you made the... What, you couldn't pay her off before? You couldn't pay her off in 2014, 2013, 2012? You could. And David Pecker, by the way, was operating because... Well, this is really a sick story. This is Jerry George. Jerry George was the managing editor of the National Enquirer, Los Angeles, for like 20 years. He said something to Erin Burnett last night on CNN that was so bizarre, having to do with Baudia Babia. Seriously.
And obviously, in this case, we're talking about David Pecker. I mean, let's be clear. You worked there for 28 years. David Pecker was a friend of Donald Trump's. I mean, there was, in some case they said Donald Trump was the silent editor of the National Enquirer.
That's true. David Pecker had given the Trump organization free rein to dictate the coverage, and of course, cover up any unflattering stories about the candidate during the election.
So let's just, again, the summary here, right, is the National Enquirer pays a Playboy model for her story, right? So she's happy. She thinks they're going to publish it, right? But the whole point is they're never going to publish it because they're going to help Trump, right? David Pecker's going to help Trump. How common was that? I mean, what I'm trying to get at, Jerry, is could there be more of these sorts of payments? How common was this sort of thing, this catch and release, as it's called?
There are other instances of this involving other women, and there's also the Saudi connection that David Pecker has obtained through President Trump.
Oh! And just give everyone a little bit more of a sense of that, what you're referring to.
Well, American media put out a Saudi special, a tourism special, earlier this year, seemingly out of left field. It was racked at Walmart.
Oh my
and
God.
it was a glossy, and it wasn't the terrain for, as usual with the Enquirer. And then shortly after that, the Enquirer swallowed up its competitor, Bauer Publications. So the money came from somewhere.
Oh my God.
I think it's suspicious, and a lot of people do.
Yeah, no, you summarized it well, and obviously in light of the president's defiant and mind-boggling defense of the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia instead of his own intelligence, that takes on perhaps a much more sinister tone.
Oh! There you go. And here we go into the Saudi portion of this crime, this conspiracy that is the presidency. The Saudi portion of this crime is going to include Eric Prince. It's going to include, just a whole load of people. This George Nader guy who's been cooperating. We haven't even begun to talk about the Saudi part. Eric Prince, he lived in the United Arab Emirates for many years. You know that he is the former mercenary Blackwater owner, right? He's friends with Mohammed bin Zayed. He is well known. He runs a different mercenary company now. He teaches the Chinese how to defeat the Americans now. But remember that Seychelles meeting that he had? He was meeting with the head of the Russian Direct Investment Fund, Kirill Dmitriev. He was meeting with Mohammed bin Zayed, the Crown Prince of the United Arab Emirates. And it turns out somebody else was there, a guy named Mohammed Dalan, who is Prince bin Salman, Mohammed bin Salman's man at that meeting. They were attempting to negotiate at the Seychelles meeting a Trump-Putin back channel, but also a larger criminal conspiracy of collusion between the United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia, Russia, Qatar, and Israel. Now, Israel, that PSYOPs firm and Black Cube, you haven't heard anything about this. We haven't even gone down the Saudi road yet, but this explains why the president refused to take the intelligence assessment that the Russians had hacked, that it could be a 400-pound guy on his bed for all you know. She doesn't know it's a Russian. Remember all that? He refused to take the intelligence, the universal, unanimous conclusion of our intelligence agencies that Russia was doing all kinds of, that they were committing, all kinds of interference in our election. They had a social media thing. They had a money trail. They had co-opted, certain people. They believed they had compromised on Donald Trump, right? All this. I wonder who has more compromise on Donald Trump, Putin or Pecker? But we haven't even gotten into the Saudi side. But now you see that Mike Pompeo and Donald Trump and Jared Kushner, you see that they are covering for the Saudi prince. There's money. He's making money. There's something. I mean, it's just, I don't even know what I mean, I kind of do know what the Saudi part of it is, but I don't want to, freak you out today with all this information. I'll do it. I'll organize a whole Saudi day and go through all the Saudi stuff that we have, because it's just unbelievable. What we need to do, and I said this yesterday, and I'm going to say this almost every day until it happens. We need to indict this president. We need to figure out whether or not Whitaker, this poser, this fake acting attorney general, or this newcomer, Mr. Barr, okay? We have to find out whether or not they will object to an indictment of the president. I'm not talking about trying the president. That's a separate subject, believe it or not. That's how our law works. I mean, you go and you sell a couple of pills to a friend, you get caught, you're going to jail. But you can be a traitor to your nation, and as long as you're the president, you're immune to prosecution. This is sick. So the incentive is to commit huge crime. Huge. But we have to indict the president, and here's why. If the president is indicted, and the attorney general, whoever that might be, because Donald Trump is having a very hard time finding anybody else to work for him. Why do you think that is? Because he's a rotten, low-down son of a bitch? Not really. It's because they know he is going to jail the second he leaves the presidency. They don't want to go down with that ship. The newcomer, the new people. I mean, even Mark Meadows wouldn't take the job as chief of staff. Nobody will work for this man. And this is what I said at the beginning. Do you remember at the beginning, we launched this show in July of 2015, and after, August or so, and it became very apparent to me, this is why I did it. I knew he was going to win. I know people are stupid, and I know people were falling for these, these little memes, that were out there, the Pepe and white supremacy and the corporations are people, my friend, and all of this bamboozling of the American people to favor corporate interests over their own. I could see that Donald Trump was playing to it, and he was selling it by using racist rhetoric. He was selling it by saying Mexicans were rapists. And the second he said that, I knew this guy could win. And that's why we launched the show. Well, by August, before the election, I was telling you that one person was a fascist and the other one wasn't. And that was your choice. And how sad it was that in a country of 350 million people, 325, whatever it is, that we only get two choices. But these are the choices. These are them. And one guy is a fascist. And the other woman was not. She may be flawed. She may not have the warmth and charisma and the ability to relate through the television. She was a little cold and all that. But I saw the advertising against her. I saw the Alex Joneses of the world. And, that's my wheelhouse. That's where, I'm very aware of what Rush does. I'm very aware of what Sean does. I'm very aware of what Glenn Beck does. And I'm very aware of what Alex Jones was doing. And I knew that this was going to be, and I saw Breitbart come online, and I saw DC Leaks come online, and I knew Roger Stone was involved. And I just thought, oh my God, he could win. He could win. This is crazy. So we have to indict this man only because if the attorney general, whoever it might be, whether it's Whitaker or it's this new guy Barr, if he agrees and makes it through confirmation, whatever, that person, if they are truly there to protect Donald Trump, the attorney general could tell Mueller that the Justice Department policy about indicting a president is that you cannot indict a sitting president. That triggers something. Do you know what that triggers? That means the attorney general then is obligated by law to share the special counsel's recommendation for indictment with Congress. And that's how we get the report. Because if the Attorney General of the United States refuses Mueller denies Mueller, then it goes to Congress. And now we have the House, and that's all we need to see what Donald Trump really has done. And that's why the Attorney General cannot deny Robert Mueller's requests based on a whim or loyalty to the president. It doesn't work that way. You know why? The special counsel law says the Attorney General must give great weight to the views of the special counsel. And if the Attorney General concludes that the action of the president is so inappropriate or unwarranted under established departmental practices that it should be pursued or it should not be pursued, and he denies the request, if that happens, then the Attorney General is required to report an explanation and a description of the actions he denied to the House and Senate Judiciary Committees. And that would be Jerry Nadler, Judiciary Committee, House Intel Committee, Adam Schiff.
I think the Justice Department needs to re-examine that OLC opinion, Office of Legal Counsel opinion, that you cannot indict a sitting president under circumstances in which the failure to do so may mean that person escapes justice. Because if it were the case that it was now or never, that if you wait until after the president leaves office, they can no longer be brought to justice, that ought to create certainly an exception to that OLC rule, if not mean revisiting and revising the rule altogether.
So am I hearing you correctly? You say indict him now and maybe try him after he leaves office? Is that what I'm hearing?
Well, what I'm saying, Wolf, is I don't think that the Justice Department ought to take the position, and it's certainly not one that would be required in any way by the Constitution, that a president merely by being in office can be above the law, can escape the enforcement of the law by essentially waiting out the law, by waiting out the statute of limitations. So there ought to be a mechanism to make sure that that is not the case, whether that means revisiting the OLC opinion that, and allowing the indictment of a sitting president and staying the prosecution, or allowing both the indictment and prosecution. But I think those issues may be foursquare before the Justice Department. Now, the department may wish to wait to resolve those issues to determine whether they're ripe, in the sense of that may not be an issue if the president is not reelected. But I think that now is something that the Justice Department needs to consider.
Me too. I think we need to see an indictment, and I think that and there is nothing in the Constitution that says that the president can't be indicted. Nothing. The Constitution does not forbid an indictment, even during his presidency. And if the Attorney General then says, the OLC, the Office of Legal Counsel, which is part of the Justice Department, which the Attorney General oversees. So if he says to Mueller, you can't indict a sitting president because the Justice Department policy since Richard Nixon has been that you can't indict a president, that would trigger an explanation to Congress about why the Attorney General is denying an indictment of the president, since there is nothing in the Constitution that prohibits that. There is no dispute that a former president is subject to criminal trial, but there is some dispute about whether a current president could be tried, but nothing about indictment.
This is the Randi Rhodes Show. To speak with Randi, dial 561-270-3844. That's 561-270-3844.
What are some of the adjectives these senators do use to describe him behind his back and in the cloakroom?
Nuts, weak, doesn't really understand government, doesn't care to understand anything complicated, asks and says the most unbelievable things in meetings that clearly shows he doesn't understand the subject matter. No intellectual curiosity.
Dangerous? Do they say?
I don't know that I've heard dangerous, but I will say this. I believe history will judge down the line those members of the Republican Party who have silently looked down and think they can just wait this out without even speaking up about the level of lying that goes on. I mean, think about this. The president this morning tweeted, there's nothing wrong with paying off a porn star that you had an affair with in order to win the presidency right before the election. That's what he basically said. I mean, that's crazy. So I really think there are a lot of my colleagues who feel trapped by the political reality of Donald Trump. And I think if more information comes out, and nobody can argue that Mueller hasn't done a good job not leaking, being professional, I think as this thing continues to move forward, I am really hopeful that more of my colleagues, the ones that aren't retiring, will finally speak out and say, no, this is not a process crime, Lindsay.
No, this is not a process crime. This is a conspiracy, and it's unfolding because Mueller is prosecuting it as a conspiracy. I've always said this is going to be a RICO act. I've always said it's going to be a racketeering act. I always said that he was, treating this as if they were, mafia members, because they are. They are. And the members of the House and Senate who are still covering for this man are also, at the very least, complicit. And at the very worst, they're compromised. It is a web of people, and those people are compromised. And the way that you find that out is by following the money. And guess who Mueller has cooperating with him? The CFO of the Trump organization, the guy I call Heisenberg, who's going to be the key that unlocks all the doors.
Yeah, I mean, all your viewers are familiar with the term follow the money. So now we have cooperating with the team the person who knows where the money went, where the money came from.
Right.
And he knows darn well that he was writing checks to companies that were built as shells, that were fabricated out of whole cloth. He knows the story, and his story is going to rule the day if he cooperates fully. And I think the message sent today is if you don't cooperate fully, like Michael Cohen, you go to prison. So I think Weisselberg is very, very motivated to cooperate.
Yes, I think he's very motivated to cooperate. He has been doing dirty deeds, done dirt cheap for the Trump family forever. But in this situation, Weisselberg, who's been given limited immunity for this case, has been cooperating with Robert Mueller. And you will see the NRA money. You will see the Russian money. You will see the shell corporations. You will understand how much money flowed from, various foreign entities into Donald Trump's pockets, into Ivanka Trump's pockets, into Jared Kushner's pockets, Saudi money and UAE money. I mean, this is such an anti-American group of people that I just can't even imagine that anybody who even cares this much about rule of law or cares this much about law and order would be defending this man. And what I can understand is that GOP members are complicit and or compromised, but I can't understand the people out there in the hinterlands who still defend this man. I just don't ever want to hear anything about the flag or patriotism or support the troop. I'm a troop. My father was a troop. A Bronze Star, a Purple Heart, a 3-continent medal, okay? People are willing to die for the rule of law. People are willing to die for freedom and democracy and clean government, not a banana republic, not presidents who are greased and paid for, and a militarized police force, and all the things that we see now that are just unbelievably anti-American, unbelievably dangerous, unbelievably wrong. The media is not your enemy. They're not the enemy of the people. Newspapers are not the enemy of the people. Reading is not a bad thing to do. You don't burn books in America. You don't everything. And they're going along with it. It's just so I don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear it ever again, ever. And it's going to become a convenient thing, you know, because there will be a war. There's no question. Russia is perched and ready and poised. They're in war posture, and anybody who is following Russia and what they're doing knows it. Everybody knows it. Jason in Simi Valley.
Good afternoon, Randy, and I just want to end the show. Despite everything you've talked about, while you've been talking, more goodies have dropped, as you may or may not know about the inauguration committee.
I told you, bye-bye, Tom Barrack.
Oh, no. But the thing we have to remember is, and you're very good about pointing this out, is this is just the overture. This is not the beginning of the play. The beginning of the play starts on January 3rd, when the shitstorm really happens. When you have Betsy DeVos up there for 5 or 6 hours testifying, looking like a deer in the headlights. The indictments on her, on Zinke, and such are all coming. And I also make this prediction that you have made. Trump will not finish out his term. There is no way that's going to be possible. Whether I suspect it'll be more of a physical incapacitation or such than the political process getting him, but the pressure on him must be enormous. And if that man's 239 pounds, I'm having a really good date with Jessica Kapstein this evening.
Right. But you know what's important about the transition? Because people are saying, well, if Trump doesn't finish out his term,
then we have Pence.
Right. And then and Pence will pardon him, and that will be the end of it. However, when you say transition team, who was in charge of the transition?
Pence.
Yes. And I've always said, haven't I always said they got Pence too? And haven't, nobody talks about Tom Barrack, and nobody talks about Mike Pence heading up the transition team. And so much dirty money came that way. And it's just mind-blowing to me that there's no coverage of Mike Pence's vulnerabilities, let's call them.
Mike Pence, to be honest with you, he'll get his time in the barrel, to use a term.
Mm-hmm.
His time is, I mean, let's be honest, he's a joke in the sense of that meeting the other day was like, I mean, good grief. But here's the point.
He sat there like a statue. He sat there like Abraham Lincoln. He just
or Weekend at Bernie's.
Weekend at Bernie's, yeah.
But here's the thing. This is the biggest mistake that they made, and I don't believe I'm saying this, is that the original transition team was going to be headed by Chris Christie.
Chris Christie, yeah.
Now, whatever you may think of Christie, and he's not an idiot. He is an intelligent person. And he would have helped them avoid much of this, but he got ousted because they wanted Flynn and the rest of it. And now
No. Christie was ousted because Christie prosecuted
that's right.
Jared Kushner's daddy.
Well, one example of good taste on Mr. Christie's part. But here's the other thing you have to remember about.
But that was before Chris Christie became political. Chris Christie was a prosecutor, okay?
That's right.
Right, and he prosecuted Charles Kushner, Jared Kushner's father, for tax evasion. And Jared, he couldn't work side by side. I mean, the nepotism was so thick that Chris Christie couldn't penetrate it. Donald Trump literally wanted Jared Kushner more than he wanted a real hired, hand, and so he threw in with Jared. And Jared wouldn't let Christie near it because he prosecuted Jared's daddy.
Yeah. Well, speaking of Jared, now we have reports which, while I've been on hold, we see that Trump is now thinking of just making Jared the chief of staff, which I'm still trying to figure out. There are nepotism laws. I'm not exactly sure how that would work or not. But, I mean, I'm going to tell you, at the end of this, how this is all going to end, at the best-case scenario, Trump works out some deal where he resigns and it gets his family so they won't be prosecuted. That, unfortunately, won't happen. And the other thing about indicting a president, here's one that no one talks about, is that what if, say, New York State indicts him and the family over crimes that were committed on New York?
Right. Well, then he can't be prosecuted. But so far...
How? Well, why not? Why not? Under New York law?
No, I mean he can't be pardoned. Sorry, I didn't mean prosecuted. I meant pardoned. He couldn't be pardoned. You can't be pardoned for state crimes. You can only be pardoned for federal crimes. And so far, though, everything we've seen has been coming out of U.S. attorneys' offices in federal offices. So it is interesting. And these U.S. attorneys are Trump U.S. attorneys. So people want to sit there and go, but Mueller, the president has said Mueller is a Democrat. Mueller is a card-carrying Republican. He is
That's right.
He's a Marine. He's a Republican. He served under, which president first appointed him? W. And then he continued on into a couple of years of Obama.
That's right.
But he's a Republican, okay?
The other point to be made about all of this is that in terms of the prosecutors and everything, that right now, these people, and I actually started looking them up because on the filings, I actually looked at the pedigrees of some of these people. And when you look at their pedigrees, oh my God, there's one woman, see the Kumalat, whatever. All I'm telling you is the worst day of Donald Trump's life when he looks back is going to be the day he won.
Yeah, definitely. There's no question. I mean, the man should not have run as president, for president. I told you he would have gotten away with everything. He could have just, gone through his life taking, foreign money and slapping his name on various buildings around the world and not renting to black people. I mean, he could have just done that the rest of his life. But, oh, no. Instead, he's going to be looked at for money laundering, conspiracy to defraud the United States, conspiracy to commit election fraud, bribery, aiding and abetting computer crimes, obstruction of justice, witness tampering, perjury, making false statements, lying to Congress, solicitation of donations from foreign nationals. I mean,
there's something worse, Randy.
What?
That I believe when this is all done, that Jared Kushner could very possibly be indicted as accessory to murder after the fact.
Oh, with the Khashoggi.
That is very possible.
It's a sick I mean, that's just amazing. That is just an amazing. Yes, but he was in touch with Prince Salman, giving him PR advice after Prince Salman ordered the dismemberment of an American resident with 2 American children living here in Virginia.
Oh, yeah.
It just blows your mind. No, they're criminal. It's a criminal crime family. There is no question. And that's why, I mean, just going back to the fact that Chris Christie couldn't be in charge of the transition. Why? Because Chris Christie had prosecuted the new chief of staff's father for tax evasion, real estate fraud. I mean, holy crap, man. Holy crap. So all these crimes, okay? Bribery, money laundering, conspiracy to defraud the United States, conspiracy to commit election fraud, aiding and abetting computer crimes, obstruction of justice, witness tampering, perjury, making false statements, lying to Congress, lying to the FBI. I mean, Donald Trump has, in public, committed crimes that qualify as witness tampering and obstruction of justice. Indict him. Let's get an opinion right now. Right now. Buy a stinking podcast.